Welcome to the Stories Are Soul Food podcast, presented by Cannonball Books and Great Homeschool Conventions.
Welcome to Stories Are Soul Food. Today we're talking about the devil.
Or the plural version, devils.
We're talking about Wormwood, Screwtape, and the Great Divorce. So we're gonna lump Screwtape Letters and the Great Divorce together in this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So could we safely say these are two of the most important works of English literature of all time?
Yes.
Is that an overstatement?
I think it could be seen as an overstatement, but I think you're allowed to emphasize things.
I'm allowed to overstate things.
Well, especially because these books are regarded as cute.
It's a podcast.
Yeah.
I'm allowed to overstate things.
Well, yeah, if we're taking Stephen A's advice, you only overstate things in order to get listeners.
Yeah, we don't need to do that.
Yeah, but
let's understate it. These are okay.
No, so we understate it by
let's back up and give some context here. So C.S. Lewis wrote a lot of things. He wrote whacking, great, big academic things.
16th century in the English language.
English literature in the 16th century, excluding drama.
Right. As she was spoke.
Yep. And books like The Discarded Image, it's a little lesser known, that I like a lot. There's a lot of
medieval
things.
Cosmology, yep.
So Problem of Pain, Four Loves, Abolition of Man, lots and lots of great nonfiction. And then of his fiction, people run to Narnia. And Narnia is good stuff. It's, there's a lot of great stuff there. And they kind of overlook the fact that his bestsellers, his biggest bestsellers, are not the Narnia books. And a lot of people miss that.
Oh, wow.
So
I don't think I even knew that.
Number one bestseller for C.S. Lewis is Mere Christianity, which is fantastic in many ways. But his number one work of fiction is the Screwtape Letters. His number two work of fiction is The Great Divorce.
Mm-hmm.
And his number three is The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
Wow.
So in terms of sales, they clock in. I mean, Screwtape Letters and The Great Divorce move a lot of units. And they move a lot of units every year in many, many territories and languages. So they are big. They're influential. They're outselling number one New York Times bestsellers that are new and current. And they just go.
And their books about heaven and hell.
Yep. And temptation. So Screwtape Letters is kind of a bent, and most people who are listening to this will already know the books because they're pervasive. If you haven't read them, you need to read them. And your kids,
that's the easiest recommend.
Yeah, and your kids need to read them, and your kids need to read them at an early age. If they're a little young for it, they need to hear you read them aloud. So, when your kids start hitting 12, 13, 14, these are books you want them to process. If it's hard for them to get motivated and it's a bad taste in their mouths and you're turning C.S. Lewis into punishment, don't do it. Like, don't do that. Don't wreck him that way. Try to find ways, like we've talked about before, to make it into a positive experience. Do a read aloud if you haven't done a read aloud before. Do it where it's, it's ice cream nights, while we're doing it. Like, okay, so this is dessert and Lewis.
Right. They're eminently enjoyable. It's weird that they're fiction because they feel so much like his nonfiction, which is something admirable about Lewis, that he saw the same target that he wanted to hit with his nonfiction as with his fiction, and he kept trying different things, I think, to reach it. And
these two books are lumped together, but are very, very different in narrative approach. And so we have Screwtape Letters. Obviously, it's letters. It's an epistolary novel. I don't know that there's any book like it. There's many imitations, but I'm not sure what he was drawing on to know that this would work. Like, I'm going to, what I'm going to do? I'm going to write letters from a young demon to his old mentor. If
mentor is the right word for demons.
/ uncle.
Yeah.
These letters from a nephew to an uncle, sort of an avuncular letter system from Wormwood, who's trying to get advice and trying to get counsel on how to corrupt somebody, how to corrupt a human.
Yeah.
And so,
I mean, I feel like, could it be taken, is it a morality play? Everything Lewis did is medieval. Is he grabbing, is he grabbing a morality play with the red devil
Maybe.
speaking to the audience. And I'm just wondering about food for thought or his.
I honestly, I think he's tickling his own amusement. I think there are things about Lewis where he's always amusing himself, but when he's amusing himself, he's always mining for perception. He's always mining for truth. And the impression I get reading Screwtape and The Great Divorce are both that these are written by a very, very perceptive, wise man who also has a bit of a sparkling, twisted sense of humor in a good way.
For sure.
And that he is using them almost as vehicles of discovery for himself.
Mm-hmm.
Like I feel like there are lessons here that he discovered on the page. As he created the characters and created the situations and then followed them through the scenarios, that he found insights. So when he successfully got all the way over into a demonic point of view and is looking at humanity coldly and from the outside and thinking about how to prey on, this person and get them to self-deception and other things, how to get them all tangled up and twisted. And it's really insightful, and it's not at all what you expect. Whenever somebody gets a demon involved in literature, it's almost always ham-handed, gross, it's horror, it's whatever. But for him, it's very, very petty. It's very petty and puppeteering. This petty puppeteering to like tie somebody's shoelaces together and put tacks on their chair.
Yeah, bureaucratic,
spiritually.
Extremely bureaucratic.
Yeah. And so with Screwtape, deeply insightful, you'll learn a lot about yourself. And that's the weird thing. He does this relay of mirrors. He's got this mirror system where you get out yourself to get this demonic perspective, to get a perspective back on yourself that's more objective than the perception you have of yourself from within yourself. And so the discussion of how to destroy a soul, how to destroy a person, will reveal to you your own vulnerabilities that you did not know were there. You will find blind spots in yourself as a human that you could not have found if Lewis hadn't created a fictional demon to comment.
To point them out for you.
Yeah, to comment on that.
Especially with the strengths. I feel like he's the demon's constantly inflating certain strengths that his victim has.
Yep.
But are actually the flip side of that's the weakness. Which is in Mere Christianity, the idea is send them rushing for the fire extinguisher when there's a flood.
Exactly. So if there's a flood, we need fire extinguishers. If there's a fire, we need matches or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Screwtape is going to live on for a very long time, as long as there are people. And as long as those people speak the English language, I think they're going to be learning from Screwtape. The Great Divorce, because Screwtape is not a comment in any way on metaphysics or on the structure of the behavior of demons. It's 100% far side demons, cartoony demons looking at humanity, but in a way that you will learn a lot from the honesty of their perception. So their honest perception of humanity, despite their own cartoony nature, will get you a ton. And let me just recommend also the audiobook of Screwtape read by John Cleese.
Oh, okay.
So,
all right, Monty Python himself.
Yeah. So John Cleese reading Screwtape Letters is fantastic and a great listen. So if you've read it 100 times already, add the John Cleese version.
Have you heard? They just did a new one. Andy Serkis did one. Did you listen to that?
I haven't yet.
Okay. I heard clips of it that sounded like he might have overdone it a bit, but it for sure was very entertaining.
And then we move from Screwtape, we move over to The Great Divorce, and it's a lot of the same thing in terms of insight into humanity's faults and temptations, but with a little more of his unique so-called Platonism that's not Platonism, his inverted world system of the earth is the land of shadows, and the in between.
So Platonism, the idea that it gets less and less material the higher we go, the more spirit-like.
Yeah. So Platonism, where you have the realm of the forms, and then down here where
stuck in gross matter.
Yep, gross matter, and we have essence versus accidents, and so the real heart of a thing is its essence, which exists in this perfect immaterial spiritual plane. Chairness is what makes a chair. It participates in chairness up there in the realm of the forms. And Lewis flips that upside down and has earth is this world of shadows. Like it is less material than heaven.
Right.
So it's not, this is the world of the material and heaven is the immaterial. It's earth is less material. Heaven is hyper material. Hell is even less material than earth.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so it's a sliding scale from heaven, which is intense physicality, the intensely real and intensely physical. And then it steps down to the shadows of earth, and then down even more to the illusions of Greytown, you know, which is the outskirts of hell. So Greytown's not even hell. It's the outskirts of pure darkness. And so he kind of sets this up, and he sets it up with a note saying, I'm not commenting on the actual structure of the afterlife, because he's not espousing purgatory. He's not doing that. He sets this world up.
Or the chance to repent after you die, those kinds of things.
He's not making any theological claims there. He sets up this framework in order to walk humanity through a struggle to rise from Greytown into the world of the real, the outskirts of elsewhere, the outskirts of heaven.
And we generally think of ghosts, like the afterlife, ghosts as being far less material than us, right?
Yeah.
But Lewis wants us to think of, what is it? What's the biblical warrant for this one that I've heard explained? Oh, after the resurrection.
Yep.
That he ate fish.
So what Lewis is playing with is that the damned become less physical.
Yeah.
You know, they're stuck kind of
moving away from each other.
Yep. They're getting further and further away, and they're dissipating, and they are real. They still exist, and their own self-perception is not of themselves as immaterial. They exist at their own plane and believe it to be the material plane, but they can't step on a blade of grass without it piercing their feet. They can't, if they get hit by a raindrop, it's going to pierce them like a bullet.
Yeah. The sound is too much for them.
Yep. The light's too much. Everything's too much. And so it's retreat into the outer darkness, or climb, further up and further in, to use his last battle phrase, and climb and become progressively more and more real. Become progressively more and more Christ-like.
Yeah, and how does that change happen? How do you? Well, it's with the leaving behind of what chains you to Greytown. Right?
Yeah, you're leaving behind your sin, and you're leaving behind yourself, and most importantly, your worship and service of yourself.
Right.
And you are in the Great Divorce. So as you climb into the mountains towards heaven, you're moving towards God and away from your own self-obsession and self-service. And in doing so, you become more and more real, more and more physical. And so you think about this and how blasphemous it seems if you can get around it, but if you think about the fact that being more physical, more real, more food, more sweat, more mud, more earth, what you think of as earthiness, just that far more intense,
right? Much
brighter, much heavier, much realer.
Of course, Lewis images that as going up a waterfall in his other work, just
having the ability to swim up a waterfall.
Yeah. More, stronger.
Yeah. Stronger, more physical, and more intense.
Further up and further in. And
so holiness is, in the evangelical world, holiness is so often an abstraction, and spirituality is so often weak and feeble.
Mm-hmm.
People that are seen as spiritual are those people who are intellectual primarily. They have an intense thought life.
So so heavenly minded.
They don't do much.
So heavenly minded, they're no earthly good. That idea.
As opposed to somebody could be a lumberjack, somebody could be splitting wood all day.
Yeah.
Doing it sacrificially, quite sweaty and physical and big.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a better picture of holiness than somebody who is spending a lot of time with his books and having a very pious thought life.
Yeah, and I was reminded when Lewis pictures your worship as yourself as this little animal familiar often.
Yep.
And I was kind of reminded of Philip Pullman
does his spirit animal thing.
Yeah, does the opposite. And I know that he overtly kind of hates Lewis.
Yep.
But he has like a familiar spirit in the Golden Compass series that's like that the church is trying to sever you from. Do you think is that overt? I mean, it's got to be, right?
Yeah, he's smart enough to make that overt.
Yeah.
Pullman hates Lewis above all else, and other than God. I think he hates God the most, and then Lewis. But you have what you see this in Harry Potter too, where it's like your Patronus is actually, it's like your deepest, most noblest self. It's like, what is the picture of your true, beautiful inner self? What's this metaphorical thing? Your Patronus. Where for Lewis, it's a little lizard on your shoulder. It's it's a little dwarf controlling the ventriloquist dummy.
You gotta break its back.
Yeah, you gotta kill this thing dead. And Lewis's insight into narcissism and selfishness is unparalleled, really. I think he sees it and spots it and calls it out and shows it to you in ways that most people will never notice. And it's once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. Whether it's a woman who is the thing keeping her from heaven is the fact that she's not properly dressed. It's always like super petty. Like, I just, I don't look good here. I'm sorry. I have to stay in hell. Like, because I am embarrassed. I'm ashamed. And so we would think of being ashamed as like a healthy, wholesome place to be. Or and now more recently, we would push towards body positivity, right?
Yeah.
But it's this weird moment where there's somebody who's feeling shame that they don't measure up. And Lewis points out that that's self-obsession and focus on the self. An inability to be uglier, an inability to be less than others is caring too much about you. It's like you should be able to embrace the fact that you are less than adequate.
Right.
You should
or
be
hierarchically inferior.
Yeah. You should be totally comfortable with the fact that you are not as good looking, that you're not as athletic, and you're not dressed for this. And if you are worried, and honestly, you could be correct that you are not dressed for this and you are not as good looking, you're not as talented or whatever. And Lewis says, get over yourself. Like you could be beating yourself up for all sorts of accurate reasons. And he says, get over yourself. It's not about you.
Yeah.
Like, it's not about you is the number one theme of The Great Divorce. And
right. Cause I'm remembering when they see that great lady going by and the most noble, you'd be tempted to
Sarah Smith.
Yeah. You'd be tempted to fall down in front of her.
Yeah. There's a huge parade and she's going by glorified. And the protagonist is told that she fed stray animals at the back door.
Yeah.
She was kind. She was kind to stray animals. And so she's got this parade going. Then, of course, we have a priest who is so proud of his bold denials of the resurrection and so on, who is not willing to come to heaven unless he could be of some service. Like, he needs to be able to minister. And so then he has to get back to hell because he has a book group. He's presenting papers.
Yeah, that Lewis sense of humor really does come through,
Yeah.
I'm reminded too, Pullman's the bad version, but MacDonald has got to be where Lewis is grabbing some of that idea from. Because in the second Curdy book, Princess and Curdy, Curdy gets the superpower. I don't remember who gives it to him, but he gets the superpower of being able to shake someone's hand and you feel the animal that they are inside. So you shake their hand and you feel a vulture claw or a warthog hoof or something like that.
Yep.
And
So and that's, as a side note, read George MacDonald, read the Curdy books, and don't feel like you have to find genius everywhere that Lewis did, because Lewis found him to be way more of a genius than I found him to be.
Well, the second book's tough.
Yep.
The second book's really tough to get through.
Well, I'm thinking of like Fantastes and Lilith and other things too, where you have the Curdy books, but then you have much more. And so Lewis found it Fantastes especially to be just deeply influenced him. But he was gifted that way with Charles Williams and others. He would read things that made him think thoughts, that they provoked insights and ingenuities in his own perception, and he attributed those things to the books he read that provoked it. So you go read Fantastes and say, I'm not having the same flash of genius.
You'd be like, this feels like a very weird fairy tale.
I'm not getting struck with the same lightning bolt of insight that Lewis was struck with. That's fine. Lewis did it for you. Go read what Lewis wrote as a result of it. The way he carries from Murderers in Heaven, like very red state, Trump supporting, self-reliant guys in hell. It's like, I never asked anything from nobody. I'm just people who are very proud of themselves for not having been charity cases versus somebody who was just awful, who's in heaven because they knew they were awful and they repented. They threw themselves away and pursued Christ. And so you have angelic murderers and devolving good people.
Yeah.
The people we would call good are not.
Yeah.
And the people who have received forgiveness are now being made real. And so Lewis, with The Great Divorce, he has no clear narrative personality. So it's episodic. It was written in serial in a magazine originally.
Oh, okay.
And so it's first person, but with no clarity on, who that person is, and no real highly developed purpose for that person. It's an observer. It's very Dickensian in that way. It's somebody being taken through this observation and seeing all these different stories. Now, which is funny because if you jump over to Narnia and you have Lucy Pevensey wanting to know, other things, and Aslan telling her, it's like, that's not your story, Lucy. You worry about you. And then you jump over to The Great Divorce and Lewis gives us this whole survey of everybody else's stories.
Yeah.
And there is no clear you. There is no clear protagonist. It's just lots of observation, but it's potent observation, and you're meant to see yourself in every, little micro arc that happens that plays out. So there's a great deal of insight into the human condition and into the things that keep us from repenting. Christopher Hitchens on his deathbed wrote an article.
Oh yeah.
Saying, if I convert, don't believe me.
Yeah, because he was dying of cancer.
He was dying of cancer. He was scared. He was tempted to repent and convert. And he really didn't want to, but he thought he might. And he knew it would ruin his legacy with all his atheist fans. So in his own alleged belief system, which he'd never actually believed, he's going to be dirt. He's going to be mulch. What does he care? He's not going to care what people think of him on the other side when he's mulch and nothing but mulch. But he still did. He still cared about his legacy, and he wanted that legacy to be the legacy of a blaspheming atheist because he'd been famous for it. He got famous. He had followers. He had, acolytes.
One last article for Vanity Fair.
Yep. And so he wrote an article saying, if I convert, don't believe me. I mean, he was right on the edge. The thing that was holding him back, the thing that was holding him back there was a really petty pride. That's a perfect picture of somebody falling off a cliff and they're hanging on with one hand. And if they just let go of their manuscript with their other hand, they could grab on and be saved.
Yeah.
And he's got his resume. He's got his Wikipedia page
His
in his Wikipedia page in his
Yeah.
right hand, which is just so depressing. That's what he wouldn't let go of. He would not let go of that Wikipedia page, his past, in order to grab on with both hands and be saved.
Yeah.
And it's very much a Lewis character from The Great Divorce. Like, I'm hanging on with one hand. I don't want to die, but this is more important. Like this other thing in my hand is more important. One of the more depressing books I've ever read and really enjoyed is a book called Camus and the Minister, about Camus wanting to be baptized.
The existentialist writer, right?
Yeah. Yep. So atheist existentialist, famous French writer, wanting to be baptized, and a minister convincing him not to.
No.
Because he basically just said in the defense
like a
of the minister.
A believing minister?
Well, so the whole story, the memoir is written by that minister.
Oh.
As a sort of penance of sorts. But he was guest preaching in Paris in a Methodist church. And the first Sunday, a bunch of people showed up, and he thought he was feeling all good about himself and realized the organist was famous. And one of the people there was Camus. There's this kind of like cool cat, French guy in sunglasses, at church, and met him afterwards and wanted to keep meeting and talking. So they started meeting to discuss things. And Camus was curious about the gospel. And the person he grabbed onto was a Methodist American minister, who then, when Camus said, I'm ready, I want to be baptized, told him, don't do that. That would be a huge publicity thing. Like if you do that, it's going to be enormous. That's going to be such a big deal. Like all your readers internationally, everything, it's going to be this massive.
He's right. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, he's right. But that's the kind of thing when somebody wants to grab the cross.
And you stopped.
Like, no, hold on. Do you realize how all your fans are going to judge you?
Oh, yeah. Right.
So in his defense, he wanted him to really mean it and to, not be surprised by the consequences. But then he died in a car wreck.
Wait, Camus?
Yeah. And so there's
how short, how soon? Or
I think before so the guy was over there in the summers in Paris, and so they met up, and in the interim, he died.
Mm.
And so, and he a lot of people argue over whether or not it was a suicide, whether or not it was an intentional thing. But the point is, with Hitch and with others, you see that insight that Lewis has into those moments, into those conversations where there's somebody who's considering repentance and then having conversations. And the thing that's keeping them from repentance is a fondness for lust. Like they know they'd have to obey God. They'd have to let go of this thing. Or a pride in their own righteousness is actually keeping them.
What they've done for other people.
Or a shame at their unrighteousness is keeping them. But ultimately, if their eyes are on the mirror in any way, if they're looking in the mirror, they're done.
Mm-hmm.
It's like they can't. And so you have all these different conversations and dialogues with characters that are all conducted, ranging from George MacDonald to different angels, conducted by these angels, these believers. They're not, it's not the Archangel Michael. It's other humans who have become real, having these conversations, trying to get people to let go of themselves and let go of their reflections. And they're even looking at a funhouse mirror. They're not even looking at, themselves honestly.
Mm.
So I think that Lewis was just really, really perceptive into sin, the human condition and self-absorption and the trap of the fall, and how difficult it is to, have your fingers broken and let go of whatever little idol is, keeping you back. And he explores them both. He explores that in Screwtape and explores that in Great Divorce, but just from different directions, like from the point of view of a demon and from the point of view of an observer who's watching all these people on the journey, these other pilgrims. And I think The Great Divorce is heavily influenced by Pilgrim's Progress, honestly.
Mm.
It just fantastically reframed.
Right.
And missing that central character, that Christian character. It is just a pair of eyes, really.
So if you were going to try and turn it into something else or use it in a different narrative form, would that be the route you'd go? You need to make the main character real, or would you?
Yeah. So Great Divorce, because I've been living with it forever, as a story I knew and read and liked, and also as a film I want to make, it is there needs, in order for it to be a film, there needs to be a central narrative character on a journey that would be sort of like a closet rod on which you can hang all these different episodes and these different characters. But there has to be a through thread that would be true to Lewis's imagination in general and to his purpose that enabled you to hang these different episodes.
Mm-hmm.
So, and Lewis brings out these truths everywhere he touches. So in That Hideous Strength, he's got a scene where they're all dressing in these medieval gowns for,
right.
Jane Studdick is up in the attics, putting on the finery of Logris, and there's no mirrors. And you are, by design, you are not allowed to dress and gauge your dress by your reflection. You have to gauge whether or not you're dressed well by the expressed opinions and responses of others.
Mm-hmm.
So when others tell you you are ready, you're ready. Then you're not allowed to even see yourself before you head to the feast of the Pendragon,
right?
Which is just another way of him highlighting the same thing of just get over yourself is probably the single biggest theme of everything Lewis writes.
Yeah, it's terrible when you're reading Screwtape Letters and all of a sudden the camera, it's like when the camera pans on normal old you sitting in the middle and you realize that's me.
You're like, oh.
I really am not that
it.
cool. Yeah. I'm also reminded too of Jungle Doctor. I think we've referenced briefly, but the monkey trap
Yep.
where you have
Yep.
a gourd with a hole in it.
And that has stuck with me forever. Put peanuts in a gourd or in a jar.
And the monkey will hold on to the peanuts,
Yep.
even though it can't get its hand out until it dies, until it is clubbed.
Yep. Yes. So
classic Homo sapiens as well.
reach into the gourd, grab the peanuts, and then be unable to withdraw your fist. And stay there till you're captured or killed.
Right.
Just let go of the peanuts. Just let go of your Wikipedia page,
right.
Christopher Hitchens. And I think he may have repented, by the way. I think Camus
You think
did.
so? That makes people very mad for you to say that.
Yeah.
I like that, though.
I think he did. I mean, I just think he did.
Doesn't your grandpa say that? There's several stages in that turning from darkness to light, and when the person starts to say the conditional with the if I.
As soon as my grandfather, an old evangelist, talks about the stages. I wish I could remember all of them right now, but he said, somebody's going to become a Christian when they start saying if I were to, and they start actually running the calculus on what would make them convert and also what would happen if they converted.
Yeah.
Like that's, I've got a friend right now who's, very there and avoiding me at the moment, but, who's willing to say lots of things, but just not quite get across the finish line. But Hitch started saying the if I convert, this will be why, and this will be how, and this is what it will be.
Didn't he say he's basically scared? It's going to be the chemo talking.
Yeah, it'd be the cancer, it'd be the fear. I'm like, yeah, true. Yes,
for sure.
For sure. But that is, you'll get your toes over the edge of the abyss and you'll see the brimstone down there and
that ain't going to smell so good.
And the incredible loneliness. And he was not killed by lightning or by a bus. It was slow and it was painful. And he was an extremely intelligent, extremely courageous man. And so whatever you think of his worldview, he was a very courageous guy. And he was staring down at the brimstone and, emailing my dad and asking questions like, when you pray for me, what do you pray for? And writing articles about if I convert, don't believe me. It's just the cancer talking, and he had enough time. And then his believing brother was able to be with him at the end. And, I'm not saying that I think I will be surprised if he did not.
Yeah.
But I know he didn't in any like grand public way. His brothers, everybody has wanted his brother to say, "Oh yeah, he repented," but his brother's not said that.
Right. Well,
so it's not. It has more to do with the conversations I happen to believe happened between Christopher and the one he's named after he was unconscious. But before he was gone. So.
Well, if we learn the lesson of Screwtape Letters, it's keep you distracted, and there's nothing quite like losing all of your work because you have cancer and are stuck in a hospital bed for keeping you undistracted. You can't think about anything else.
Yep.
I don't remember who had that famous quote. We only have one deathbed conversion in the Bible.
Yep.
So that no one should be too cocky about it, but we do have one lest anyone despair.
Yep. And it's pretty crystalline, and it's literally happens within seconds of the atonement is the first deathbed conversion.
Right.
So the fact that it's the first guy in line is also significant. So, a thief on the cross who's actually being executed with Christ, and we're given the two pictures immediately, and honestly, like everything Lewis wrote in Screwtape and Great Divorce is informed by the two thieves. So I think that, and by their manner and their behavior and their different types of brokenness.
Okay. So you mean their response to actual truth.
Yeah.
So them being faced with truth, they have two ways to go.
Two people are executed with Christ. That's not an accident. It's not a coincidence. This is by design.
One sheep and one goat.
Yep. And one reviles him as if he's still superior and is still more into himself. Like he's naked, getting nailed to a cross, and he still has some energy left to revile the maker of the world next to him.
Oof.
And the other, which is intensely petty. Like that is intensely petty.
Yeah.
So he's not even like in shock or caught up in his own horror.
Or aware of his own faults.
Right. Yeah. He is alert and present enough to be wildly petty to his maker next to him. And then on the other side, you have Dismas, who, the traditional name for the thief on the cross who repents, who is it's very simple. It's a very simple, very simple cry for help. And so I think that Lewis distills, and I think this is the way the world is, it distills those two breaks, like the wishbone breaking in those two characters, and distills that out in all these different scenarios with overprotective moms and self-righteous, self-reliant men and priests who are all about themselves. It's like, he's brutal. I mean, he is brutal.
Yeah.
And one of the most brutal episodes in The Great Divorce is a mom who's gone literally through hell and gotten to the edge here and is experiencing intense physical pain and suffering in order to get further up into the outskirts of heaven to try to see her child who died, and is not allowed to. Like, gets to heaven and is not permitted to see her child. And the most brutal exchange there is when an angel tells her, it's like, because this is heaven for him, and you have no place in that, because for him to see you as you are and as you have been would be hell. Like, it's, so you're rejected because he's supposed to be having a good time. It's like, and this mother who's now died, who lost her child on earth and has now died and has now gone through all this physical torture to climb through razor blade grass to get to this point to try to see her kid, is rejected because she sucks. I mean, it's like, yeah, you suck a lot. And so I'm sorry, we're not gonna let you see your child. He does not belong to you.
Right.
Like, he is not yours. He is not about you. And so that particular tantrum in that particular moment is one of the more heartbreaking episodes that Lewis dives into. And I think probably one of the best ones for our listeners and for us, people in the church,
right,
who really are protective of their kids and really do feel like their kids belong to them. They are ours, as opposed to younger brothers and sisters that we're watching, that we're looking after. Yeah. So anyway, I love these two books. I know that I'll be reading them in decades, and I know that I will be learning things.
That would be an unrelenting movie. I'm just trying to think how you'd be able to, that kind of thing. When you have that much truth, at least the parabolic form of Lewis's writing gives you kind of breathing space.
Yeah.
But when you see that person and see yourself in them, man.
It's like, and this is another way in which you're terrible. And this is another way in which you're terrible. And this is another way in which you're terrible.
I mean,
and
it's the
honestly,
same thing. Yeah.
Of course you're terrible. So just stop being so into yourself, because you're terrible. So just let it go.
That only hurts if you haven't confessed that.
Yeah. Just let it go. Be done. Be done with yourself. Read Screwtape. Listen to Screwtape. Both of those are really valuable. It's a short, fast read. Read Screwtape Letters, but listen to it.
I'm gonna see if I can read it to my children, because I haven't done it yet.
We'll see if they track. They're young.
I bet Ash would like it.
Yeah, probably. Letters from Demons. Yeah. It would be very interesting. And then you're like, but they're so boring.
Well, yeah, we've been having big discussions about, they hear stories from certain friends who say they've had interactions with the demonic.
Yeah, great.
So we have the big discussion
Just remind them that demons are petty and stupid.
Right.
And if you let them go into pigs, they'll commit pig suicide instantly.
Yeah. Salted pork.
They'll be homeless again right away. This constant self-destruction. So read these, listen to them, and keep reading them. These are short books, and they will yield a harvest every time you read them. Both of these they're so dense, they're so rich. It's kind of like getting chocolate lava cake in your wheelhouse. You can do that. Do it once a year. Do it once a quarter, and it's intense. There's a lot there, but they're both really striking, both really compelling, and it astounds me that he had the perception and the imagination to have written both of them. And the themes are so consistent and coherent, and the approaches are so wildly different, and yet the one consistent sense of humor and perception and just biting honesty, just absolutely cold, unvarnished truth that shows
to see
up
if our listeners can share some more mirrors. I like the idea, the mirror theme. I feel like that's everywhere in Lewis, and I want to hear the rest of them.
The other ones where it shows up?
The other ones where it shows up, but I think...
Well, you see it until we have faces, which we're going to talk about also.
Yeah.
Just, I mean, the actual removal of a face. The whole theme is like, you are faceless. But yeah, you see that self-absorption, the self-awareness is the thing he kicks against in both of them. You'll enjoy them. If you haven't read them, do so. And you'll never read them again for the first time. So really savor that. The first time reading Screwtape, that's such a valuable, cool moment.
We haven't even spoiled it for you.
If you have read it before, do it again, listen to it, come back around, put it in your regular annual rotation because they're short. You can do that and you will gain something every time.
There you go.
Alrighty. Stories are soul food. Read more Lewis. That could also be the podcast.
Read more
Lewis. More Lewis. And in parentheses, again.
Don't be the monkey.
Don't be the monkey. Let go of the peanuts.
If you enjoyed this episode, check out the audio series, The Lewis Lectures by Douglas Wilson. Streaming now on the Canon app.